It felt like I blinked, and the man I'd spent nearly 2 decades with suddenly wasn't the same anymore. Or maybe it was slower than that, like a faint crack forming in glass, something you don't see until it's almost splintered through. Either way, when it finally hit me, it felt like a thunderbolt. Our life had its routines, little pockets of comfort that had come to define us. I thought those small gestures, Saturday morning coffees, quiet dinners on the patio, were enough to keep us together. So, when Robert started talking about changing things up, making things exciting again, I thought he was feeling what everyone feels after 40, a need to hold on to youth, to not let our best years slip by. When he first brought up wanting to join a gym, I laughed a little. Robert hadn't been to a gym since our early years of dating. He was always more of a bookish, thoughtful type than the sort to worry about reps and protein shakes. But he was determined, so I helped him pick out some new sneakers, bought him a gym bag, even found a fitness app he could use. Felt good to support him. After all, marriages are about encouraging each other. And if this was what he wanted, who was I to stop him? But then, small things started to shift in strange ways. It was as if Robert wasn't just adding this gym membership into his routine. He was reshaping his whole life. He started working later, always a reason why he couldn't make it home for dinner or had to miss family outings. Our conversations shifted from shared memories to his sudden obsession with personal growth and individual space. These words, individual and personal, were becoming so prominent. It was like he was building a wall I hadn't noticed before. When he came home with an entirely new wardrobe, fitted, expensive, bold, I felt a strange mix of surprise and curiosity. He had always been a practical guy, not someone who cared about designer labels or slim fit anything. I complimented him, thinking he just needed reassurance, that maybe I hadn't noticed how insecure he'd been feeling about himself lately. "You look great," I told him, hoping my encouragement would help. But then I noticed that he wasn't listening to my compliments or seeking my approval. His attention was fixed elsewhere, on something invisible just out of my reach. He would spend hours at the gym, meetings that stretched late into the evening. Weekends, once reserved for us, became me time he insisted he needed. I remember one Friday evening I'd cooked his favorite meal, set up candles, trying to spark something between us. When he texted that he was out with friends, my heart felt like it had dropped. Still, I told myself he deserved his own space. I didn't want to be the kind of wife who held him back. Then one night I found a text on his phone. A single message that changed everything. I hadn't meant to look, but there it was, a message preview that flickered across his screen while he showered. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow," it said. Innocent enough words, but it felt like poison in my veins. When he came out of the bathroom, I couldn't hold back. "Who's she, Robert?" My voice barely trembled. I surprised even myself. He froze, towel in hand, as the shock and guilt played across his face. He didn't deny it, didn't fumble with excuses. He just looked at me, his face falling in a way that both confirmed everything and shattered whatever hope I had left. "It's not what you think," he started, but I couldn't hear it. He was right there, standing in front of me, but suddenly he was a stranger. How could he do this? How could he look me in the eyes day after day while carrying on with someone else? I felt nauseous, betrayed beyond words. In the days that followed, I learned her name, learned that she was younger, vibrant, someone he'd met at the gym. They bonded over shared goals, shared dreams of finding themselves again. He painted a picture of their relationship as something deep and meaningful, as if that would make it any better, as if knowing he'd found some emotional connection with her could heal the wound of his betrayal. He tried to tell me that this was all part of his midlife journey, that he needed to explore who he was outside of us. I felt like a relic, a character in his life that he'd simply outgrown. I'd been with him through so much. Career changes, family crises, our own quiet struggles to make this marriage work. But now he was telling me that all those years, all the history between us, weren't enough. In the quiet hours of the night, I began to question everything. I questioned if I had done something wrong, if I had failed him in ways I couldn't see. I thought of all the ways I'd tried to support him, the encouragement I'd given him to grow, to explore his interests. I had been there every step of the way, not knowing that he was already gone. The house feels hollow now. He's here sometimes when he isn't with her, but it feels like living with a shadow, a ghost of who he once was. He's told me he needs time to figure things out, to find himself. And while he does that, I'm here piecing myself together, figuring out what life looks like without the man I thought I knew. Some nights I feel this strange blend of anger and grief, moments where I want to scream at him for what he's done, and others where I wish I could simply make sense of it all, make sense of why he felt the need to tear apart everything we'd built. I know I deserve more, deserve honesty, deserve love. Yet here I am, grieving not just him but the version of him I'd held on to, the future I thought we'd have. And maybe, as painful as this is, I am also on my own journey. Perhaps I, too, will emerge from this, someone changed, someone stronger. But right now, in this silence, all I can do is hold on to myself and hope that someday, the wounds he left behind will finally heal. I wake up now in a bed that feels too big, the space next to me cold and untouched, and every morning that emptiness cuts deeper. I had hoped the pain would dull, that maybe I'd wake up one day and feel a little lighter, but grief doesn't work that way, does it? It's relentless, a slow burn. There's no skipping ahead, no easy fix. Sometimes, when I manage to gather my thoughts, I wonder if all those little changes I'd noticed but ignored were warning signs I simply didn't want to see. The strange new colognes he started wearing, or the way he'd pull out his phone and angle the screen away from me, as if I was prying. Every detail now feels like a breadcrumb in the story of his departure, clues that my mind now scrambles to connect in a puzzle that doesn't add up to anything I recognize. One day, I mustered the courage to meet up with an old friend, someone I hadn't confided in yet, but who somehow knew. "I heard about Robert," she said gently, her voice laced with that sympathetic caution people use when they don't want to break you. "Are you okay?" Was I? In some ways, I felt more lost than I ever had in my life. Robert had been my partner, my person. We'd shared dreams, held each other through struggles, laughed over little inside jokes that no one else would understand. And now it was as if he'd picked up his own story and walked out of ours, leaving me stranded in the wreckage. "I don't know," I managed to say, the words sounding raw even to my own ears. "I thought I knew him, knew us. Now it's like everything was a lie." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand, her eyes warm with understanding. "It wasn't a lie," she said. "People change. They lose sight of themselves, and sometimes they lose sight of the people they love. But that doesn't mean everything you shared was false." Her words stayed with me, lingering in the days that followed like a gentle whisper against the chaos of my thoughts. I wanted to believe her, to find some kernel of truth to hold on to in the midst of this devastation. Maybe it wasn't all a lie. But how do you separate the truth from betrayal when the two are intertwined so deeply? A few weeks passed, each day bringing a new wave of emotions. Some mornings I wake up angry, furious at him for tearing our life apart. Other days I felt hollow, an emptiness that stretched beyond sadness into a void I didn't know how to fill. I'd started sleeping in the guest room, finding some strange comfort in a bed that didn't remind me of him, where his scent didn't linger like a cruel reminder of what was lost. But despite the distance, despite everything, he still hadn't moved out. Every night he came home, later and later, slipping in quietly as if to avoid me, and every morning he'd be gone again before I could confront him. I wondered if he even realized what his presence, his strange, ghost-like presence in our house, was doing to me. Maybe he thought he was sparing me some kind of pain by not being fully gone, or maybe he was just as lost as I was, grasping for something he couldn't even name. Then, one evening, he came home earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup I'd made out of habit, something comforting and simple. I didn't look up when he entered, keeping my eyes on the slow, steady circles I was making with the spoon. He cleared his throat awkwardly, as if he were a guest in his own home. "I thought you'd be asleep by now," he said, his voice strained. "I could say the same about you," I replied coolly, not looking up. I didn't want to see the look on his face, the look that would betray just how far we'd drifted from the people we used to be. He hesitated, lingering in the doorway, and I could feel his eyes on me. Finally he spoke. "I want you to know that I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't even know how it got to this point." For a moment I nearly laughed. How could he not know? The choices, the lies, the betrayal, it was all so clear to me, like a series of cuts he'd made with perfect precision, each one leaving a scar deeper than the last. "You didn't mean to hurt me?" I repeated, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Then why did you do it, Robert?" He didn't answer, and in that silence, I felt the final bitter truth settle over me. He didn't have an answer because none of this was about me. It was his own emptiness, his own crisis, And I'd just been collateral damage in his quest to fill whatever void had opened up in his life. The realization was brutal, but in a strange way it was also liberating. This wasn't about my worth, about something I had done or failed to do. It was his journey, his struggle with himself, and I couldn't carry the weight of it anymore. After that night, I stopped waiting for explanations or apologies. I started focusing on myself, taking small steps to reclaim pieces of my life. I began going to the gym, not as a desperate bid to win him back, but for me to feel strong in a world that felt so uncertain. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with, spent long hours reading novels I'd always meant to finish, filling the silence with stories instead of grief. One afternoon I visited a therapist, someone who could help me make sense of the whirlwind I was caught in. She listened as I poured out everything, the betrayal, the confusion, the anger, the sorrow. And then she looked at me, her eyes filled with a compassion that felt like a balm to my wounded heart. "You've lost something significant," she said gently. "But sometimes in the wake of loss we find parts of ourselves we didn't know we had. This journey you're on, painful as it is, could lead you to a place you never imagined." I left her office feeling lighter, a small sliver of hope taking root in my heart. Maybe she was right. Maybe this wasn't the end of my story but a beginning. A chance to rebuild, to find strength and resilience I hadn't known I possessed. As the months went by, I felt the weight of grief lift little by little. There were still days when the pain crept in, but it was softer, quieter, no longer an all-consuming ache. And slowly, I began to see a future that didn't revolve around Robert. One that was filled with possibilities I'd never considered. I started taking art classes, something I'd always wanted to do but had put off for years. I picked up painting, letting the colors and shapes carry me into a world that felt vibrant and alive. I traveled to places I'd dreamed of visiting, tasting freedom in ways I hadn't known I'd missed. In these moments I began to see myself not as someone who had been left behind, but as someone who was moving forward, discovering new paths and new joys. The woman who had once clung to the remnants of a broken marriage was evolving, blossoming into someone stronger, someone who could stand on her own. Looking back, I realized that Robert's betrayal was painful. Yes, but it also set me free. It broke me open, allowing me to grow, to rediscover myself. And as I stand here now, on the other side of heartbreak, I can see that maybe, just maybe, this journey wasn't about losing him. It was about finding myself. As I settled into this new rhythm, it wasn't an overnight transformation. The weight of Robert's betrayal still lingered in my heart, though it grew lighter with each passing day. There were evenings when I'd be watching some silly show alone, or mornings when I'd reach for my phone out of habit to text him something small, something that used to feel like a natural part of our lives. And in those moments the emptiness would settle in, thick and undeniable. But I was learning to carry it differently, learning to let it simply be part of me, rather than something that defined me. Friends who had once tiptoed around the topic began to invite me out more often. They encouraged me to explore things I hadn't before, to take a cooking class or join a book club, even just to have a night out where we could all laugh and let go. There was a lightness in these new routines, an ease I hadn't realized I'd been missing all those years when I'd been so focused on keeping our marriage together, so consumed by trying to fix something that had already been crumbling. It was one particular night out with friends that I met Ethan. He wasn't someone I noticed right away. He was quieter, with an understated confidence, someone who lingered on the edge of the crowd rather than trying to stand out. My friend Lily nudged me, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous grin. "He keeps looking over here," she whispered, gesturing subtly toward him. I shrugged it off, but over the course of the evening, I'd catch him glancing in my direction every now and then, a faint smile crossing his face when our eyes met. I wasn't ready for anything serious, and in some ways I wasn't even sure if I was ready to let anyone in at all. But as the night wore on and our group dwindled, Ethan came over, his eyes warm and his voice low, as if he was as unsure about this as I was. He introduced himself and we talked at first about casual things, the weather, favorite movies, a recent trip he'd taken to Italy. His calm presence was comforting, and it felt strangely effortless to talk to him, as if he understood that I needed gentleness, no expectations, just a moment to be seen. For weeks afterward, we would meet up occasionally, our encounters light and easy. There were no demands, no need to define anything. He was patient, never pushing or prying into my life, never asking questions that were too close or too raw. We would sit in quiet coffee shops or take walks along the lake, sharing small parts of our lives, pieces that were safe to reveal. I began to look forward to these moments, the way he'd listen without judgment, his laughter, his gentle smile that seemed to say he understood more than he let on. One evening, as the sun was setting, casting a soft golden glow over the park where we'd been walking, he looked at me with a quiet intensity. "You know," he said, his voice gentle, "sometimes the hardest part of healing is letting go of the story we told ourselves about our lives. The story we thought we'd always be living." His words lingered in the air, settling around me like a weight, yet somehow they didn't feel heavy. They felt true. I nodded, feeling a pang of something that was both sorrow and hope. I had been holding on to that story, our story, for so long, afraid that if I let it go, I'd be left with nothing. But maybe he was right. Maybe part of moving forward was allowing myself to rewrite that story, to let it become something new. Ethan and I continued seeing each other, but I resisted calling it anything more than friendship. He never pushed, always respecting the boundaries I'd put up, though I could feel a growing warmth between us, a subtle shift in the way he looked at me or held my hand a little longer when we said goodbye. There was a kindness to him, a steadiness that I hadn't realized I needed, something different from the restless energy Robert had developed in his quest to rediscover himself. As the months rolled on, I began to think less and less about Robert. I would still occasionally see him around town or hear about him through mutual friends, snippets that felt distant, like echoes of a life that no longer belonged to me. I learned that he and the younger woman had split not long after everything had come to light, and there was a part of me that felt vindicated, though it was mixed with sadness. He had lost his way, chasing something fleeting, something he thought would make him feel whole, only to find himself more alone than before. Then one day he showed up at my doorstep. It was a gray morning, the kind of day that made everything feel heavier, the air thick with the promise of rain. I opened the door to find him standing there, his hands tucked into his pockets, his shoulders hunched. For a moment I felt that familiar ache, a reminder of what we'd once shared, of the life we'd built and lost. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, but something in his expression softened my defenses. We sat in the living room, the silence stretching between us, filled with years of memories and the ghosts of unspoken words. Finally he spoke. "I know I hurt you," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know that I never stopped caring about you. I was lost, searching for something I thought I needed, something that would fix the emptiness inside me. But none of it was real. You were what was real." I felt a wave of emotions, anger, sorrow, a strange sense of closure. His words were late, so painfully late, but there was a sincerity in his eyes that I couldn't ignore. I had once longed for him to say those words, to give me a reason to believe that what we'd shared hadn't been in vain. Yet now, hearing them, I realized I didn't need his validation. I had already begun to build something solid, something true, from the ashes he'd left behind. "Robert," I said slowly, meeting his gaze, "I loved you, and I thought that love was enough to carry us through anything. But love isn't about filling a void in ourselves. It's about sharing what's already whole. And maybe neither of us was whole when we started this journey." He looked down, his expression filled with a kind of remorse I hadn't seen before. I know that now. And I'm sorry for everything, for all the hurt I caused you." There was a part of me that wanted to cling to that apology, to make it mean more than it did, but another part of me, stronger, wiser, knew that forgiveness was something I was ready to offer, not for him but for myself. I had no interest in rekindling what was lost. I was already on a different path, one that didn't include him, and I could finally see that as a gift. We parted with a quiet understanding, a finality that felt both sad and freeing. And as he walked away, I felt a weight lift, as if the last pieces of our shared history were finally truly behind me. In the months that followed, I found myself embracing the future with a new openness. Ethan and I grew closer, our friendship evolving into something deeper, something rooted in a mutual respect and trust one hadn't known was possible. We were in no rush, letting each moment unfold naturally, both of us savoring the beauty of simply being present with each other. Looking back now, I see that Robert's betrayal, painful as it was, had led me here, to a life that was richer and fuller than I'd ever imagined. I had found strength within myself, a resilience that allowed me to not just survive, but to thrive. And maybe in some strange way that was the gift hidden within the heartbreak, the chance to rediscover myself, to find a happiness that was entirely my own. I was no longer the woman who needed to hold on to a life that didn't serve her. I was someone new, someone who could love deeply without losing herself, someone who could stand on her own and embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. And with that realization, I finally felt free. Months passed, and my life slowly took on a new shape. I was learning to fill it with things that brought me peace, strength, and a sense of adventure that I hadn't felt in years. It was like rediscovering myself piece by piece, the woman I'd set aside while trying so hard to keep everything together with Robert. With Ethan by my side, I felt encouraged to explore sides of myself I hadn't acknowledged in ages. He was kind, steady, but he also pushed me gently to reach further, to try new things that were, in his words, long overdue. It started with small things: hiking in the mornings, cooking new recipes from books I'd never touched, and painting every weekend. I even began volunteering at a community art center. Helping young people find their creative voice became one of the greatest joys of my life. Watching them light up when they'd create something beautiful felt like a spark I was lighting inside myself too. One day, Ethan surprised me with a trip to a nearby city. We spent the weekend wandering through art galleries and tucked-away cafes, laughing, getting lost, just enjoying each other's company. At dinner in a quiet bistro with dim lighting, he reached across the table, took my hand, and looked at me in that gentle, patient way that had become so familiar. "You know," he said softly, "I've watched you grow so much in these past months. You're glowing like you've found something beautiful inside yourself." His words struck something deep in me, and I realized he was right. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. A happiness that didn't rely on anyone else but me. I didn't need a partner to feel complete, yet I was grateful to have someone by my side who supported that wholeness, who celebrated it. It was then that I realized how rare and precious this connection with Ethan was. It wasn't built on trying to fix each other or fill any emptiness. Instead, it was a relationship grounded in a mutual respect for each other's individuality. It wasn't about clinging to each other out of fear of being alone. It was about walking side by side, growing together while remaining true to ourselves. Over time, Ethan and I built a life that felt natural and honest. He moved in slowly, bringing only the essentials, not wanting to disturb the space I had reclaimed as my own. His thoughtfulness touched me in ways that words could never express, and together we created a home that felt peaceful, filled with laughter and warmth. Then one day, as we sat on the couch with our mugs of tea, a thought crossed my mind. I looked over at him, hesitating, but finally asked, "Do you think this us could last forever?" He looked at me, his expression serious but kind. "Forever is a big word," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "But if you're asking if I want this to last as long as we can make it, then yes, I do." We didn't need promises of eternity. I had learned painfully that nothing is guaranteed. But the commitment we shared, the openness and honesty we nurtured, was something far more precious than any vow. It was real, built day by day with patience, love, and an understanding of each other's journeys. Years passed, and with every season our bond deepened. We faced challenges together, some small, some large, but always with a sense of unity. We traveled, explored new hobbies, and even opened a small art gallery in town where we showcased the work of local artists. It became a place filled with color and life, a reflection of the growth and healing I'd experienced. Looking back on those years with Robert, the hurt had softened, like a faded scar that no longer caused pain. It was part of my story, but it didn't define me. I had become someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who could face life with an open heart. One quiet evening years later, as Ethan and I sat by the fireplace, he looked over at me, his gaze warm and familiar. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought about it, letting the question settle into the deepest parts of me. I was happy not just because of him, but because I had found a way to build a life that honored who I truly was. I had learned to love myself, to trust in my own strength, and to find beauty even in the moments of struggle. "Yes," I replied, feeling the truth of it resonate within me. "I am happy." And in that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, I was ready for it. grounded in a sense of self-worth and resilience that nothing could ever take away. My journey wasn't about finding a perfect life, but about embracing each imperfect, beautiful step along the way. As the years continued to unfold, life took on a steady rhythm, one filled with a sense of peace and purpose I hadn't known in the years I'd spent with Robert. Every day, I found myself deepening into the life I had built with Ethan and, more importantly, into the life I had built within myself. The gallery flourished in ways I hadn't imagined, becoming a space not just for art, but for community, for shared moments of creativity and connection. It was a place where people gathered, where stories were told, laughter was shared, and friendships blossomed. The gallery became a part of me, a canvas for the person I'd become, and was still becoming. Ethan and I kept things simple, savoring the little moments. Early morning coffees as the sun rose over the town, hikes in the mountains, late-night conversations that left us both laughing or quietly holding each other as words became unnecessary. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but there was a stability in us, a quiet understanding that no matter what life threw our way, we'd face it together. It was a partnership built on respect and compassion, a bond that didn't need grand gestures or constant reassurances. We trusted each other, and that trust was the foundation of everything we'd built. And yet, there were still moments when my past would tap at my heart, uninvited, like a visitor I thought I'd long since sent away. It might come in a fleeting thought, a memory, or even in unexpected moments of doubt. There were times when I'd catch myself questioning if I was truly worthy of the happiness I had now, wondering if it was only a matter of time before everything slipped away again. Healing isn't linear, I learned. It's a winding path with unexpected turns, setbacks, and revelations. But I'd grown used to these moments, to treating them as reminders of how far I'd come, of the strength I'd gained. The memories were part of my past, but they no longer held power over me. One chilly autumn morning as we prepared the gallery for a new exhibit, a familiar face walked through the doors, catching me off guard. It was Robert. I hadn't seen him in years. Time had changed him too. He looked older, a little wearier, but his eyes softened when he saw me. He seemed almost hesitant, lingering by the entrance as if unsure whether he was welcome here. I hadn't expected to feel anything when I saw him, but a strange, nostalgic warmth surfaced, mingled with curiosity and a hint of old pain that felt distant, almost unrecognizable. "Hello, Sarah," he said, offering a tentative smile. "Robert," I replied, a mix of emotions swirling in my chest. I took a steadying breath and gestured for him to come in. "It's been a long time." We exchanged pleasantries, both of us skirting around the more complex undercurrents of our shared history. He asked about the gallery, complimenting the pieces on display, and we talked briefly about mutual friends, old memories surfacing in gentle waves. It felt strange, surreal even, to speak so casually with the man who had once held my heart, who had shattered it and in doing so had unknowingly set me on the path to becoming who I was now. Finally, he glanced around the room and then back at me, his expression contemplative. I wanted to apologize, Sarah. I know it's years too late and maybe it doesn't even matter now, but I've thought a lot about what happened. About the way I left things. I was selfish, lost, and I hurt you in ways I can't take back. I know you probably don't need to hear this, but I wanted to tell you, to finally take responsibility. There was a time when I had longed to hear those words, to feel some closure in knowing that he understood the pain he'd caused. And now hearing them I felt an unexpected sense of calm, a final piece clicking into place. I had already forgiven him, forgiven myself, and moved forward, but his words offered a quiet validation that, yes, I had been wronged, and that acknowledgement allowed me to finally, truly close that chapter. "Thank you, Robert," I said softly. "I appreciate you saying that. I think we both grew in different ways. Maybe we couldn't have done that together." He nodded, a hint of sadness in his smile. "You seem happy," he said, his voice gentle. "I am," I replied, the truth of it ringing clearly between us. There was no bitterness, no regret, only gratitude for the journey, for the lessons, and for the life that had emerged from the ruins of what we once had. As he left, I felt a sense of lightness, as if some final weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying had lifted. I watched him go, feeling not loss but a gentle sense of closure. I turned back to the gallery, to the vibrant canvases and sculptures that filled the room, to the life that was now mine. In the days that followed, I noticed subtle changes in myself. There was a new level of freedom, a joy in my daily routines that felt less like recovery and more like truly living. Ethan noticed it too, and one evening as we sat on our porch, he smiled at me in that knowing way of his. "You seem lighter," he remarked, his hand gently covering mine. I laughed softly. I think I finally let go of something I didn't know I was still holding on to. He squeezed my hand, his warmth grounding me. "I'm glad," he said simply, his eyes reflecting a love that felt deep and enduring. Life continued, weaving together moments of joy, challenges, and countless small adventures that colored our years together. I began to write as well, penning down my thoughts and experiences, sharing my journey of self-discovery and healing with others. I started leading workshops at the gallery, encouraging others to explore their creativity as a path to healing. Watching people come alive as they painted, sculpted, and expressed their stories brought a fulfillment I hadn't expected. I found that by sharing my story, by opening up about my own struggles and triumphs, I could help others find their strength too. The gallery became more than just a business. It became a sanctuary, a place where people could come, create, and find solace. I held exhibitions for new artists, giving them a platform to share their own voices, to tell their own stories. Each piece that adorned our walls carried with it a narrative, a reflection of the artist's journey, and in curating these exhibits, I felt I was helping to build a community, a safe space where people could connect, heal, and find inspiration. Ethan continued to be my partner, not just in life, but in every endeavor. He would help with everything, from setting up events to supporting artists, and we became a team, working side by side to make the gallery a place that celebrated resilience and the beauty of the human spirit. And through it all, our love grew deeper, more profound in the quiet ways that truly mattered. He never sought to take over my dreams but instead stood beside me, supporting and encouraging me in ways that allowed me to flourish. As I entered a new chapter of life, I realized that my journey of self-discovery and healing would never truly end, and I was grateful for that. Each day brought new insights, new lessons, and I embraced each one with an open heart. I no longer feared loss or heartbreak, for I knew that no matter what came, I had the strength to face it, to find meaning in it, and to continue growing. Life, with all its twists and turns, had given me gifts I hadn't anticipated, and I was finally at peace. Looking around at the life I had created, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, for the hardships, for the love, for the path that had led me to this place. And as I stood in the gallery, surrounded by beauty and the echo of stories shared, I knew that this was only the beginning of an ever-evolving journey, one I was proud to call my own. Years continued to pass, each one layering gently over the last, weaving together a life that felt full and true. With every season, I discovered more about myself and my purpose. The gallery became more than just a business venture or a passion project. It was a bridge between my past and future, a testament to the resilience and beauty that can emerge from pain. People in the community began to recognize the gallery as a place for transformation. Those who were hurting, those who felt lost, or who simply needed a quiet space to reconnect with themselves, would find solace within its walls. I saw young artists fresh out of school nervously presenting their first exhibitions, elderly people rediscovering long-lost dreams, and even couples working on pieces together as a way of rekindling their connection. The gallery evolved into a kind of sanctuary, a haven for people seeking more than just art. They came looking for something within themselves, just as I had once done. Ethan was my partner through it all. His patience, kindness, and quiet strength were my anchors. He had his own pursuits, working with the community on various projects, lending his expertise and warmth wherever it was needed. We had a rhythm together that felt effortless yet profound. It wasn't built on dependency or desperation, but on a foundation of genuine friendship and shared respect. I was grateful for him in ways I hadn't thought possible. He had shown me that love could be gentle and strong without demanding sacrifice of oneself. One evening, we hosted an event celebrating the gallery's 5th anniversary. The place was bustling with familiar faces, artists, and patrons who had come to mean so much to me. The walls were adorned with pieces from some of my favorite artists, each one telling a unique story of struggle, hope, and renewal. Standing there, watching people move through the gallery, listening to the hum of conversation, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection, I felt a wave of pride and gratitude. This was what I had built, this was my life's work. And it was so much more than I had ever dreamed possible. As the night wore on, I slipped out onto the gallery's small balcony for a moment of peace. The air was crisp and a soft breeze swept through, carrying the scents of autumn leaves and the faint sound of music from inside. I wrapped my arms around myself, taking in the quiet beauty of the moment, feeling a deep sense of contentment settle over me. I was no longer the woman who had been left shattered, wondering how to piece herself back together. I was whole, strong, fulfilled, and standing firmly on my own 2 feet. After a few minutes, I heard footsteps behind me, and Ethan appeared, a gentle smile on his face as he handed me a glass of wine. "Celebrating your work," he said, clinking his glass gently against mine. "You've built something incredible here, Sarah. I hope you know that." Looking at him, I felt a swell of emotion. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for everything. For believing in me, even when I didn't know if I could believe in myself." He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray hair from my face. "I didn't have to believe in you, Sarah. You already had everything you needed inside. I just had the privilege of watching you find it." We stood there in comfortable silence, the lights from the gallery casting a warm glow over us. In that moment, I felt an immense sense of gratitude, for Ethan, for the journey I'd been on, and for the person I had become. I didn't need anyone to complete me anymore. But I was thankful to have someone who saw me, who truly understood me, and who chose to walk this path alongside me. Over time, my relationship with Ethan became less about romance and more about a deep, enduring partnership, a love rooted in mutual respect and a shared desire to grow, both as individuals and together. We didn't need grand declarations or labels. We had a quiet understanding that was enough. We shared a life that felt like home, one that allowed us both to thrive without compromising who we were. One particularly rainy spring, as we sat in our cozy living room with cups of tea, Ethan brought up an idea that had been brewing in his mind. What if we started offering workshops here at the gallery? Not just for artists but for people looking to explore themselves, to connect with something deeper. I looked at him, the idea sparking excitement. "Like a retreat for the soul," I said, nodding slowly, feeling a thrill at the thought. Not just art, but journaling, meditation, creative writing. Ways for people to explore parts of themselves they've been afraid to touch. We spent the next few months planning these workshops, pouring our energy and hearts into creating a space where people could come, unwind, and dive into the parts of themselves they'd kept hidden. Our first workshop was a small group, a mix of locals and people from neighboring towns. There was an air of nervous anticipation, but as the weekend went on, I saw those initial nerves give way to openness, to vulnerability, to connection. During one of the sessions, a woman slightly older than me shared her story, her own journey of heartbreak and rediscovery. As I listened, I saw pieces of my own journey reflected in hers, and I felt an overwhelming sense of kinship. I realized that my pain, my struggles had connected me to so many others, that my story was part of a larger tapestry of resilience, one that bound us together in our shared humanity. The workshops became a regular part of our lives. People from all walks of life found their way to us, each bringing their own stories, struggles, and hopes. Watching them transform, seeing the light return to their eyes, was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. The gallery had grown from a place of art to a place of healing, and I knew I had found my calling. Not just in helping others find their voice, but in creating a space where they could find themselves. As I watched the gallery continue to grow, I felt a deep, steady contentment. I no longer needed validation from anyone outside myself, and I had learned to embrace life's uncertainties with open arms. There were still challenges, still moments when I felt vulnerable, but I knew now that I could face anything. I had built a life that was full of meaning, love, and purpose. A life that was mine fully and completely. Years later, standing once again in the gallery, I watched as people moved through the space, their faces filled with quiet wonder, laughter, and sometimes tears. I saw pieces of myself in each of them, reflections of the person I had once been and the person I had become. The gallery walls held my story and the stories of so many others who had come through, leaving pieces of their hearts behind in each brushstroke, each line, each whisper of color and light. And as I stood there, surrounded by the art, the people, and the journey that had brought me here, I knew that my story was far from over. There would always be new chapters, new experiences, new ways to grow and to love. Life, I realized, wasn't about finding a perfect ending. It was about embracing each moment, each change, each twist of fate, with an open heart and an unwavering spirit. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't anticipated. A quiet, fierce pride. Not just in the life I'd built, but in the person I'd become. A person who could face the world with courage, grace, and an unshakable belief in the beauty of her own journey.